I'd like to welcome you to our beautiful Latches Theater. For those of you who haven't seen the renovations, isn't this beautiful? My name is Orly Munzing. I'm the Executive Director of Strolling of the Heifers. And I have a little secret to tell you. And that is, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but we're looking to close on the River Garden this coming Thursday. We're turning the River Garden. It will still be open space, but our focus in the River Garden is to have it as a farm food education center. And we're very excited about it, and I hope that you will all join us in this wonderful celebration for Brattleboro, Vermont. It's like bringing the farm to Main Street and really keeping agriculture in the center of our town. And I thank all the farmers who are here, and I recognize some in the audience for really making sure that we remember where our food comes from. Without much ado, I'd like to introduce you to Julie Potter, who is the General Manager of the Strolling of the Heifers.
Thank you. Thank you. I am Julie Potter, General Manager of the Strolling of the Heifers, and thank you for coming out this afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to Strolling of the Heifers' presentation of some of the farmers who were part of John Nopper and Susan Harlow's photographic essay, The Vermont Organic Farming Pioneers. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce John Nopper and Susan Harlow.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks to Julie and Orly for putting this on. Thank you. Thanks to John for convincing me that this was a good idea, and particularly thanks to the farmers who spent so many hours talking to me. It was wonderful. And I've said this before, but I woke up in the middle of the night so many times terrified that I had to take people's lives and summarize them on a piece of text. It was terrifying. But I think it's been okay, and John's photos, if you haven't seen them, I think they're wonderful. And I also just wanted to say that I was thinking this morning about 10 years ago, the Putney Historical Society had an event with Bill Darrow, Don Harlow, and Dwight Miller, where they all came and sat in front and just talked about their lives as farmers. And it was a wonderful thing, and I think that's where the seed of this whole thing came. So. Thanks very much.
Great. And so moving on, now I'd like to introduce you to Roger Albee, who is the former Secretary of Agriculture of the state of Vermont. Roger.
Thank you, Orly, and thank you, Julie. It's very exciting to be here because I do a little bit on ag history, and it's exciting to see these, what I would call new organic farmers, because all farmers were organic in the beginning when the first settlers came to Vermont, and it wasn't until the 1800s that non-organic fertilizers came into being. So these people charted a new course, and they charted a very interesting course that really set the stage for the organic movement, not only in Vermont, but in other parts of the United States. And today, I think we're seeing interest in local foods, both organic and non-organic. And what these people did in terms of being path setters really was exciting. Their toil, their sweat, and their inspiration. So I'd like each of them to take maybe about 5 minutes to introduce themselves, where they're from, the type of farming they do, and what really inspired them to get involved in the beginning, and maybe some of the both challenges and opportunities that they have seen along the way and may see in the future. Howard, can we begin way at the end and come this way?
Anyway, you know my name, Howard Prusak. I came to Vermont in 1971. I intended to stay just for the summer working on a farm, but I never left. I liked it. And I got interested in health foods when I was in high school, And I got into organic foods, and the year before I came up, I mean, I was getting so crazy about foods, I was pretty much living on organic goat yogurt from some Amish farm in Pennsylvania because I didn't trust anything. And I realized, okay, I got to see like where does this food come from. So I arranged to spend a summer on a farm called Nature Farms in Putney that was started by Kim Hubbard and Samuel Kamen, and some of you, the names might register with you. Samuel went on to start Stonyfield Yogurt, which probably most of you already tried a few times, and now he's retired and living in Maine. Anyway, it made a big impression on me, and I really liked it, and I never left. And that farm dissolved, and I sort of picked up the pieces and continued with it. And I bought the neighboring farm in 1979, where I am to this day. First got certified in 1976, and supposedly I was the first certified farm. So, no, 76. 76. So, little cool history there. And now we're a split farm in terms of we do horticulture, a lot of greenhouses, grow organic herbs, and a lot of vegetables. We ship to 4 different states. We have 10 employees at our height seasonally and 3 year-round employees, and it's nice to be a part of the economic fabric of Windham County and Brattleboro. So, and I'm glad to be here, so thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, Howard.
Hi, I'm Paul Harlow from Westminster. I've been here my whole life, 62 years. I'm son of a Republican dairy farmer, conservative. Both he and his father, my grandfather who bought the farm in 1917, are, staunch Republicans, so they were, and organic was not in their realm of thinking. They had done all their farming with chemicals, and that's what when I first started farming. Actually, I probably started farming when I was 8, was the first time I remember driving the farm all A, raking hay, and I just loved doing that, making the perfect circles in the field, and that was one of my first jobs when I was about 8 years old. And I started in earnest around all through the 60s. My father sold the cows in 1965, and we started growing vegetables together. And then I took over in 1974. And I was doing things, like applying chemical fertilizer, and I'd spray. And in the mid-70s, I started seeing that there were a lot of weeds that I'd never seen before, and they were harder to kill. We had to spray more, and there weren't any worms in the soil either. I noticed that when I was a kid, I could always dig up worms to go fishing, and there wasn't any worms. And we'd stopped using cover crops and no manure, and then I would see the wind blow the soil around, and I said, I don't think this is right. And I started doing some reading, and around 1976, and actually I was inspired by Howie. Howie and I we had farm stands, and we would go to market to buy vegetables for our farm stands together, and so I got to know Howie a little bit, and actually had him over for dinner one night, my wife Susan and I, and we started talking about it, and we, in 1976, we had one little plot, we called it the Big O, and we decided to try a little bit of everything, and damned if it didn't grow pretty well. And one thing led to another, and we became totally certified in 1985, I think 85 or 86, and that's when I joined, formed Deep Root Organic Truck Farmers. And actually that reminds me of another person that I wish she was here. She helped start Deep Root, Carol Reese. She and Joe Scanlon helped us start Deep Root, and she was a renowned farmer in this area for quite a few years, and she passed away quite a few years ago. So it's kind of sad to think about some of the people who have left us. So anyway, one thing led to another. We had about 35, 40 acres, and I became pretty much a wholesale farmer, and selling to Boston, Whole Foods, or actually Bread and Circus back in those days, the Erewhon stores. And then I bought another farm and added on, and bought another farm, and now I've got about 400 acres, and kind of a large for this area wholesale farm. And I started raising a few animals just so I could have my own meat, organic meat, and started as a hobby. And Now we've got about 4,000 or 5,000 chickens and 50 or 60 cows and 100 pigs and 10 or 15 sheep. And and we've done all that to actually to help the local consumption. Even though we ship a lot of stuff out of state, I still believe in local, and that's been my goal, is that we could all feed ourselves in this county. And I think it's coming, it's getting closer to it. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Joey Klein. My farm career also began down here in the greater Brattleboro area, though I've moved on to the frontier since. I got lured off by the good tillage further north and the cheaper land and the excitement of being out beyond the hippie culture, which later caught up with us anyway. I moved to Brattleboro in 1968 to go to Marlborough College. I fell in with the commune scene around here, and I very quickly realized that what rang my chimes was growing food. It just happens, that, and thank God that there's still the instinct to grow food present in the human race, that some of us just can't seem to help ourselves, and just really not only want to grow a garden for ourselves, but want to grow food for our neighbors. And I lived with a bunch of very interesting groups of people: Heifer Hill Farm in West Brattleboro, Packer Corner Farm in Guilford, all sorts of people up in Williamsville and Putney. I moved around the area during the 12 years I lived down here. Grew many large gardens, and it just seemed that it became a personal inner necessity to figure out how to grow this stuff in a way that would really make it healthy. I share with Howie the health food in impulse. I was inspired by the macrobiotic teacher Mishukushi, who really said, you guys, you got to eat organic, and if you can't find organic, why don't you just grow it? And then we had to figure out how to grow it. And this led to, had the impact, one of the big impacts was the formation of Johnny's Selected Seeds. Rob Johnson came right out of Erewhon Farm in Ackworth, New Hampshire, also a product of this fertile area. I since have moved up to Plainfield, Vermont. A middle-sized or a small grower. I'm a small wholesale farm. I've decided that I really like supplying the local co-op. That's the niche that really works for me. And in my area, it's Hunger Mountain Co-op. And it's a very wonderful feeling to be one of the suppliers of your neighborhood food supply. And it's been a very exciting thing to be part of here in Vermont. The commitment to invent organic methodology is something that we farmers have worked at together in a highly cooperative manner over the years. And it's been a really great bunch of people to be with. And so everybody is, you know, from one end of the state to the other, we tend to know each other. Except, of course, all these new people that we're very excited to welcome aboard. Anyway, that's my story. I'm still doing some growing up in Plainfield. I'm trying to figure, you know, people talk about how to get into farming. Nobody does any workshops on how to get out.
You need an intervention.
Yeah, we're going to need some help being able to pull that one off. I'll let Jack take over.
I'm Jack Laser from Westfield, Vermont, Butterworks Farm, and this is my wife, Ann, and we've been doing this together since, I don't know, 1974, I think. And my background is, you know, I went to Tufts University outside of Boston, and during the sort of the turbulent late 60s, early 70s, and didn't really like the political I mean, I went to all the demonstrations, but they really didn't speak to me. But what did speak to me was sort of the Back to the Land movement. And so I had to figure out, well, what can I study at Tufts that would kind of be legitimate and I could maybe get some agricultural knowledge. So I ended up studying the history of agriculture and created my own major. And I grew up just outside of Sturbridge, Massachusetts. So I worked on the farm at Sturbridge Village when I was going to college. And then I met a fellow who was working there who was from Barnet, Vermont, who was just south of St. Johnsbury. And they had an old-fashioned dairy farm where they did everything the old-fashioned way and with everybody else's cast-off machinery and technology. So when I graduated from college in 1973, I moved up to Barnet and started working on the Warden farm, and that was sort of like my first summer apprenticeship. And not too long after that, I met Ann, and she was in Wisconsin, so I went out to Wisconsin for a year and found out that, hey, they actually grow grain for their dairy cows out here in Wisconsin, and, you know, we could do that. And then I started looking around, and I saw all these old granaries on these farms here in Vermont, and we came back to Vermont in May of 1975, and within a week we had a family cow and a workhorse and pigs and chickens, and you know, we were basically homesteaders. And Ann was working at Mental Health, and I ended up teaching school in Newport for a few years, and I kind of, you know, push led to shove, and one cow led to two, and two led to three, and before we knew it, we had 6 cows, and they were in our garage. And I remember I stopped teaching school in '79, and you know, we raised a bunch of calves on the milk, and then all of a sudden the calves were ready to wean, and we needed to do something with the milk. So we had this little book called Making Your Own Cheese and Yogurt at Home. So we started making yogurt and cheese on our kitchen stove, and in like the blue and white enamel pots, one inside the other. And then I just got in my car one day and started knocking on people's doors in town. And we live in the Northeast Kingdom, you know, almost on the Canadian border, and it's very, very rural. And to my surprise, people started buying my dairy products. And so all of a sudden I kind of developed a route, and it was weekly, and we had raw milk in Tropicana juice jars, and eggs and yogurt and cottage cheese and farmer's cheese and curds, and you name it. We did it. We went to farmers markets, and then we started slipping it into a few stores here and there. And we knew we weren't supposed to, but we did anyway. And then all of a sudden we got a visit from the state, and they said, you know, you need a license to do this. So that was 82, I think, and I said, well, okay, we'll get a license. And so it took us till '84. We built a barn and you know, a little processing plant, and you know, all sort of everything the old-fashioned way. And that's kind of the farming that we did. I mean, since I didn't grow up with it, you know, we had to have a threshing machine and a grain binder, and we had to like have a belt on our tractor to do our silage, and you know, and then we'd do something like that for a year, and then we would go on to the more modern way. But it's been quite a journey, and you know, so over time, you know, we've ended up with more land, and I didn't really want to use chemicals, but the pressure to use chemicals was pretty intense. And Ann's brother worked for this company called Velsicol, which is a big chemical company, and you know, he wanted to give us some free herbicides so we didn't have mustard in our grains, because we started growing grain right in the very beginning, wheat for our bread, and but I said, no, we're not going to use it. My father worked for Monsanto in Springfield, Massachusetts, and you know, and he liked chemicals too, but I didn't. So, but I didn't really know what to do. I mean, I can remember like going around my pasture with a pitchfork, you know, picking cow pies up and saying, you know, how am I going to fertilize my land with just this little cow pie? It's not going to. And so I finally, you know, learned about composting, and it's been quite a journey. I've met tons and tons of old timers who had so much knowledge, and they were very willing to share it, and it's been a great experience. And you know, we're up to 40 or 50 cows now, milkers, and another 40 young stock, and you know, we've sort of developed our own systems, and it's taken years and years to learn our craft, and a lot of it's seat of the pants, and you learn the hard way. But I'm really glad that we stuck with it, and we're still milking cows today, and people are buying our dairy products, and we're very grateful for that. So I think maybe Ann wants to say a little something too.
I guess I need to speak to the learning curve of learning how to milk cows organically, as well as as doing the crops, because I was really the one that was responsible for the animals. Jack helped in the beginning with the animals, but he got out of there as quick as he could because he really preferred crops. Anything you could drive a tractor, it had to be 1 acre or more. And then it was all right. He'd experiment with anything, but it had to be an acre. And but I was working with the cows, and there was no technology available for organic dairy production at the time. In fact, there wasn't certification for organic dairy until 1989 or 87, somewhere in there. And there were only 3 organic dairy farmers, or 2 organic dairy farmers in the very beginning. We made our own standards. And then it gradually increased when Peter Flint got on with the organic cow. But we started out just trying to figure out how do you keep a cow healthy. And of course, not growing up with the cows, we had a lot to learn anyway. But we didn't have all the training in antibiotics already, so we were starting with a clean slate. We just had to figure out how you could keep cows healthy with other techniques that weren't available from the pharmaceutical companies. So that was quite a learning curve there. And we have learned a lot by the seat of our pants over the years. And I think it's been good. It's been a really a fun path to travel. And we've had a lot of great interns come and live with us and share their insights and share ours. And we've got 3-generation farm now. Our daughter and son-in-law are actually transitioning into as the next farmers, which is the only way I've found the resolution to how to retire from farming, is get the next generation going. So they're pretty much taking on the farm as much as they can. And of course, Jack's having a harder time letting go than I am. But then we have 2 grandchildren that enjoy being on the farm quite a lot. So they're all living right in the whole farm complex. So we've had a really good experience over these years, and we're really thankful for it.
Thank you very much. What rich background, knowledge, energy, passion, and learning. I think we'd like to actually open this up to the audience if we could have the lights. And there's 2 mics, one here and one here. And if you would like to ask a question, just direct it to anyone on the panel, and I think that would be quite helpful. There's some people are calling what's happening today in Vermont a renaissance of agriculture. In view of that, what would you recommend to young people? Would you tell them they exclusively should go organic or non-organic, or how do you think the issue should be addressed by young people who want to go in agriculture and farming in Vermont today? Yeah, Howard.
Why don't you start in, Howard?
Well, you want to grow what you can sell, and what you could sell, the public is demanding organic produce for the most part, especially if you're going to sell it locally. I know there are still obviously conventional farmers, and maybe it's a personal decision, but I think long term, if you're just starting out and trying to make a farm succeed, I would try to do it organically, just for your own health and for the health of the soil and the health of the community. I mean, that's what we do, so I wouldn't recommend any other way, and that's all I really know. And it worked for us, and it works for the community, so that's what I would recommend.
I don't think there's any choice but to grow organically. I wouldn't do it any other way. Although I do remember picking corn in weeds so thick I couldn't even see the corn. I thought, what the hell am I doing out here? But there's things you're learning, and a lot of the farmers in our generation, the ones passive, they've learned a lot of the techniques, of cultivation, and equipment is much better than back in our day. It was a farm all cub with a set of cultivators that they've been used for 100 years, and we've used some of the old style cultivation, but now there's a lot of new cultivation equipment, a lot of techniques, a lot more studies been done. I think it's much easier for farmers to get into it, and the market's there better than it was. When we first sold produce in our stand, we tried to get 10 cents a pound more than the conventional. We're kind of transitioning, and people would just walk right by that. So I want the good stuff, you know, the one with the spray on it. So people's mindset has definitely changed. I think that people with children recognize the need to feed their children healthily, and it's best for the soil. And I think in 2 to 3 generations we'll pretty much be all organic or some simile of it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too, Paul. There's almost a religious belief here that organic production methodology is a means of moving the sustainable lifestyle forward. I mean, genuinely sustainable. It can happen without poisoning the planet. The idea that we have to poison ourselves and poison the environment to grow food just seems so backwards to me. And it takes some ingenuity, and it takes some thinking, and it takes reaching back into the past too, to find the techniques that really work. But like Paul said, we got a handle on it eventually. And the people who are coming into organic production now have a lot of expertise to draw on that wasn't around when we got started. I think that there's a real opportunity to do it right.
Jack.
I would tell people that you've basically got to follow your heart and have passion, and find mentors that you can work with and get knowledge. And not everybody's going to want to farm organically, and there's a lot of good conventional farmers. I really don't like using poison, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. And I think one of the things that I find really bugs me is the number of people who are certified organic farmers who are raising pigs or chickens on their farm and feeding conventional grain while everything else they do is organic. And to me, they're really, you're really buying into GMO agriculture when you do that. And I really don't have any use or tolerance for it. But I can't really judge. I'm not going to judge anybody else. I know that I have enough of my own problems, and people usually have reasons for what they're doing. But I wouldn't farm any other way either. And it took a long time to develop our skills, and we're still learning every day. But it's wonderful, to be able to do it without Roundup or fungicides or herbicides. Especially when you get a really good crop, and and that you haven't used any foo-foo dust or stuff that you wouldn't want to tell your consumers about.
And as far as organic dairy is concerned, if young people would want to get into organic dairy, there's a much better, more dependable market for organic dairy than there is for conventional dairy, especially if they're selling to a co-op like Organic Valley. And if they're doing it independently and trying to process their own milk, then they have a whole new range of challenges. But there's certainly a demand for organic dairy in the co-ops and in the health food stores also.
Thank you. Do we have a question down there? Please introduce yourself and ask.
EJ, Emil from Broward. I have a question. How tough was it going through this process of getting your organic certification? How tough was it going through the state to be certified in organic food?
I think Howie should tackle that.
So, Howard, how tough was it to be certified organic in the beginning?
In the beginning, it wasn't hard at all. It's definitely a lot harder now. It wasn't the depth of knowledge back then, and it was fairly easy. It took a day, and I didn't even need a lot of paperwork in the very beginning. It's definitely a lot more complicated now. Records of everything, I have to have a paper trail for where everything comes from, where everything goes to, who you sell it to. I hope you got all that. All right, anyway, but it's still, if you could keep records at all, it's not impossible. Obviously, we've all been certified, and there's hundreds of them in the state, so it's a process.
Anyone else How difficult?
Well, I'll take that one for a second. The certification process in Vermont was originally designed by Vermont's organic farmers. I mean, we argued with each other and debated about what the standard should be and came up with, I think, a fairly rigorous set of guidelines. And for me, the standards aren't just a code of laws that I need to obey. It's more a guidance in terms of philosophical approach to how I farm. The actual details of filling out the paperwork is odious, quite honestly. Onerous. We're going to come up with a bunch of words here. But I think the consumers deserve a good record of what the farmer uses to grow the food, and if anybody really wants to know, it's there. And the practices that we use and the substances we use are all checked out very carefully for their lack of toxicity. And the overall effect is a good one. I think it's worthwhile. There was a period of time when anybody could call anything organic and sell it as organic without necessarily doing anything for it to be organically grown. And I'm glad those days are gone.
Jack?
My only beef with organic certification is that it really doesn't measure quality. You know, it's sort of a set of standards and rules that you have to follow. But as far as, producing nutrient-dense food from mineralized soils, they don't really talk too much about that, you know. I mean, they want you to have good soil, but, and I think once the USDA took over organic certification and took it out of our hands so that we couldn't have our yearly meetings and argue back and forth and come up with, I mean, they were great meetings that we used to have. I remember them in South Royalton, or Royalton, I guess it was, and, we'd always have a potluck lunch, and, we'd all be like worn out at the end of the day, but it was really fruitful, and, it really meant a lot because we had our own rules, and we weren't trying to pad the rules. But I don't know, once the NOP and the NOSB came along, it's just, of course, organic is much bigger now than it was when we started, and it's an industry now, and but if that's what it takes to change the agriculture in this country to something more benign and sustainable, I guess that's what we've got, and we have to go with it.
Ann, any response? You probably filled out the paperwork, right?
I'm kind of on the fence with this one because I also serve on the review committee for the Vermont Organic Farmers. And so I'm filling out the paperwork for our farm, but then at the same time I'm reviewing a bunch of other people's farms and dealing with problems that people have where they use the wrong thing, or dealing with reviewing substances that people have applied to use and that kind of stuff. So I kind of see both sides of this picture, but it's fraught with problems one way or the other, just to try and keep everything, working well and make sure that things are, I mean, how do you judge some of these substances? It's pretty hard. But we have a really good crew of people on this review committee because there's dairy farmers and there's vegetable farmers and there's, extension people and things like that. So there's a lot of experienced people involved. But when it comes to filling out our own paperwork, I have to agree, it's quite onerous.
Other question, Peter?
Jack, I know you've done some breeding of various seed varieties and stuff, and I don't know if you others have, but I'd like you to talk about seeds and seed security and developing varieties.
Great. Yeah, I've been growing grain. My first crop here was 1977, and I started growing wheat that year. And a couple of years later, I got my first seed cleaner up in Quebec from an old timer who had one, and I still have it today. And so I started actually cleaning my own seed for replanting. And I didn't really think much about it when I first started doing it. I just wanted to kind of get the mustard seed out of my grain, and because I had plenty of it. And but as time has gone on, I can remember I could save my seeds for my cereal crops, oats, wheat, and barley pretty easily, because I mean they mature in August, and but I really wanted to grow some corn and soybeans too, and so in 1990 I started growing corn and soybeans as in my rotation, and I very quickly found out that I live on a hill farm, and they don't grow that well up there. It's just a little cold, and so then in 1994 I rented some land at 800 feet lower in elevation, up the road a little ways, and actually started growing corn and soybeans successfully. And then I did that for a few years, and then in 1996 GMOs came along. I mean, that was the first year that they had Roundup Ready soybeans, was 1996, and then very soon after they had Roundup Ready corn and BT corn, and in the beginning, it was only several varieties in the seed catalog were GMO, and as time went on, now when you look at a Pioneer seed catalog or Seedway or any of these companies that sell corn seed to farmers, there'll be 22 varieties that are stacked or triple stacked, or have traits that are basically been genetically modified, and there might be 2 or 3 conventional hybrids. So the whole industry has definitely moved in the direction of this sort of genetic insertion type breeding. So for me, I have my own variety of corn that I grow now, which is called Early Riser, and we make cornmeal out of it, and we sell seed to other farmers. But I have to be very, very careful, like where I grow it, because I got to make sure that there's no other corn around, because I don't really want to get it cross-pollinated. And then I have to have my seed tested every year. They call the PCR test on it, and that's $200. And the conventional seed companies aren't paying me to test my seed. It's my responsibility to test my seed, but if they didn't have this technology, I wouldn't need to test it. But I feel really, really good growing my own seed. It's I do appreciate some of the genetics that you've got from the big companies, and but what I think, Vermont's a corn silage state. We don't grow much grain corn here, and the thing about corn silage is that you cut it early enough so that it's not going to fall down. And I don't know why. There are a lot of old open pollinated varieties of corn that would make really good silage corn. There's less lignin in them, so they're more easy for cows to digest. And I think it would be really, really neat if there was more seed corn production in this state. So even if you were a conventional dairy farmer, you could buy like Minnesota 13 or Cornell 25. I mean, some of these older varieties of open pollinated corn. You could even save a few rows for your own seed if you wanted to. I mean, but I don't know. I guess for some reason that really turns me on, and I'm not a consumer of this kind of technology. That's not. There's a lot of people who don't feel like I do, but. It's the direction I want to head. And there's a lot of interest. We have an organization here in Vermont called the Northern Grain Growers Association, and Heather Darby, who's a UVM extension agent, is sort of, she's our advisor, and she does a lot of grain research herself. And, since Heather's been on the scene for the last 10 years, my own knowledge has really furthered, and a bunch of other farmers' knowledge has furthered, because she has a grain lab at UVM, cereals lab now, and so we've got a lot more knowledge, and I feel like we're growing all the time, and it's a good thing.
Thank you. Yes, could you use a mic? Or go ahead, you're close enough.
I have a question for you about public policy.
Could you give your name, please?
I'm John Wilmerding. I have a question for you about public policy. What do you have now that works for you? What doesn't work for you, and what would you like to see?
I'll address the food safety issue. FSMA is the acronym for it. I'm not even sure what it is, but it's a national policy that the FDA has instituted because of all of the food problems with people getting E. coli, et cetera. people are a little bit more, they're very afraid of their food. And most of these problems have come from large farms out in the West. And a lot of the rules are geared towards large farms in California. I'm talking specifically vegetables. And it's a totally different environment than our state of Vermont. I mean, there are things like you can't have an animal in your field. If a deer comes out and you see a deer track, you're supposed to cordon it off and not harvest any of that crop. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of trees in Vermont, and all our fields are surrounded by trees. And this is just one of the instances. But all the rules are geared towards large farms. And there's a scorched earth policy in California where even organic farms have to destroy all their windrows, all the vegetation around their fields. And I've heard some farmers that they're sad about that. So anyway, this policy there's a big comment period at FDA that ends on the 15th, and we're hoping that the same thing that happened with the organic standards when they first came out. There was a big outcry. They wanted to endorse GMOs and sewage sludge and a lot of things like that, radiation of food, and that was actually there was such a public outcry that rewrote the rules, and so we're hoping that they will be able to redefine them so that they're regional and they can be applied to our state. Be pragmatic about it somewhat. So.
Anyone else?
I'll make one kind of little comment about it seems like there's a lot of, like, USDA is really promoting value-added agriculture these days, and there's all kinds of grants for it, and there's a Working Lands Fund here in Vermont. But at the same time, we have something called the U.S. Department of Labor. And so they'll come onto your farm if you're a farm like Paul or myself who have a lot of hired help, because we have a processing plant and we've got 12 people working for us. And what'll happen is if you're doing any type of processing on your farm that they consider processing, they make you as a farmer pay your farm help overtime because you've ground some flour that's going to go to somebody, or cornmeal, or you're processing seed, and that's been really tough for us because we try to pay really good wages in the first place, but I can't really afford to pay, when somebody's getting $17 an hour and you have to pay him time and a half, that's sort of beyond our budget. And so I feel like there's this sort of like one side doesn't know what the other side is doing, and it's labor regulations are really difficult.
Labor is going to be a big issue for us in the future. I think that it's hard for us to we employ 50 or 60 people, and that's going to go up in the future. And it's difficult for us to find enough local people to get the work done. That don't want to leave at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and not work on weekends, and which I understand. That's the way the lifestyle of people is these days. But it's sort of like cows. Those cows, they want to milk them every day, and vegetables is the same thing. Something happens every Saturday and Sunday that need to in the vegetable business you have to take care of, and you just have to work every day, and finding qualified workers and people that want to do the work on a timely basis is going to be difficult for us in the future.
Other questions? What about guest workers? Anyone use guest workers?
We do, yep.
Yeah?
Yep. We have 14 Jamaican guys that have been coming for 13 years now, and they're like part of the family. We welcome them back every year. They're here for almost 6 months, and I feel like it's a win-win situation. They earn money to send back to their families, and they actually help the local economy because they buy a lot of things in our area that send back to their families, and they buy food here, and so they participate in the local economy, and I think that they're a big benefit. We had difficulties with the Department of Labor along those lines too. They make it harder and harder for that to happen, and we're constantly filling out more and more paperwork, and one of the more regulations and policies that are difficult to deal with. I find like all I'm going to do is just paperwork, and that may be what drives me out of the business, is too much paperwork.
What kind of certification do you have to go through besides the organic certification? Do you have buyers who require different certifications?
Well, the food policy, food safety issue it's called GAP right now. Some larger supermarket chains are requiring we be GAP certified, which is a precursor of the new FSMA rules. So our big accounts, Whole Foods, aren't requiring it, but they're watching it, and within a couple of years, we'll all have to be, food of a size. There's exemptions, et cetera. And for housing, we're inspected for all our housing to make sure that that's adequate for the H-2A workers.
Howard?
We're GAP certified, but basically we have only one account that requires it, which is Hannaford's, and we only sell to one Hannaford's. That's the one here on Putney Road. Now, it's a really nice account, and we believe in GAP. Food safety obviously starts on the farm, and we've really learned a lot. And I wish it was more in terms of education with other growers. I wish, whether they're certified or not, they should learn the procedures because food safety starts, small farms that are under the weather, they could learn a lot by implementing a lot of these, simple sanitation things. But yeah, it's another regulation. We have to deal with it, and it costs out of pocket, and we just passed just last week. We just got certified for the year again, and it just keeps on piling up. This FSMA thing, it's going to be another layer, and there's a unified GAP process that some markets are starting to require. So it's getting, the future doesn't look good in terms of paperwork. I don't see it getting any better unless consumers step up and let their voices be heard and own some of the responsibility for washing their vegetables. All these regulations assume no one's ever going to wash vegetables. And that was the first thing I remember learning. Wash your fruits and vegetables. It was simple back then. Now it's like, nobody could do that, so it has to start on the farm.
Let's get into some controversy. What about GMO labeling?
All for it.
I think it's simple. People should know what they eat. It's pretty basic. We're the last industrialized country in the world that doesn't require GMO labeling. I think even Canada's, I'm not quite sure, but even Russia requires it. Something's wrong with us in this country. The politics and the big business is controlled by, well, we know who. So we're all for labeling. We should know what we eat.
Would it be based on scientific standards, Howard?
Well, there's science and then there's so-called science, and who does the scientific work? There's not a lot of work being done on the science. All the tests are being run, and ultimately they've been controlled by Monsanto and Dow. So it would be nice if there was some objective science, but right now the science doesn't look good for GMOs. As far as the farmer is concerned, yields are just as good long-term, if not better, on conventional farms that are not using GMOs, crops. And crops are becoming Roundup Ready resistant. The crops that are supposed to, the weeds are becoming Roundup resistant. It's a dead end. I think it's a dead end, GMOs. It's a dead end. There's a lot of other ways to increase food production. And food production increase is going to be, it's real important. We need, population of the world is growing. Farmers are leaving the farm. China's buying American pork companies because they're securing their food supply. The issues are getting a lot more complicated going forward, and we all need to pay attention. But GMOs, yeah, it's science. Science is great, but let's see who does the science.
Climate change. What have you seen in terms of your operations in terms of climate change and invasive species and other things that you maybe haven't had to deal with that you're now dealing with?
Well, we often are still picking kale in the middle of December. I'm pretty sure we didn't do that. Well, we probably didn't pick kale when I was younger. I don't think we heard of it. But everybody has now. Eat more kale. We see it more in the fall, later in the season. Early in the spring, we've been plowing in March before, but I did that 30 years ago too. I see more of an extended season in the fall. A bigger problem is the wide swings in weather, severe storms. 2-3 inches of rain for several weeks at a time, and then long periods of drought. And I think that's more of an issue for the farmers in Vermont is the extreme weather patterns.
Jack,
I've seen a lot more flooding in the last 5 or 6 years. I've got quite a bit of river bottom land, and it can be underwater any month of the year now. I mean, and what I find interesting is that it doesn't take much of a rain to have high water. So it kind of tells me that the carbon sink in the forests and other places is not as absorptive as it used to be. So things are changing, even in the short term.
Joey?
Yeah, I think things are really fragile. The climate is, we can say we like the fall raspberry crop. That's really nice. I mean, there's some things about the softening of the weather that's wonderful, but overall the pattern is threatening, that the extreme rains and the extreme droughts are, to be worked around. And there's parts of my farm with the heavier soils that I haven't been able to use in years, that I used to be able to rely upon as a ground I could plant in the beginning of June, that would do beautifully for fall crops, because we'd have some sunny, dry weather that would give it a chance to really take advantage of a clay soil. Right now, it's the sandy loams that you need to be able to cope with all the rains. And hanging on to nutrients becomes an issue with the overly wet springs. The soils get leached. And we'll just cope with it as we can, I guess. It's going to be interesting.
One last question for each of you before we end this, but looking back on what you've done over your lifetime as organic farmers, what would you do differently today, starting with Howard?
Deep question. Like we used to say in farming, what do you do if how do you make a small fortune in farming while you start with a large fortune? But no, seriously, folks, I don't think I would change much. I mean, I'm still here, so I guess that speaks for itself after 40 years of farming. And looking forward, what's interesting is I'm more excited now, and I've got more projects I'm juggling to build than I did, way back. The marketplace is changing, but there's more opportunities. Interest rates are low. I think it's a great time to think about agriculture as a business. I think it's great for Vermont, and I'm digging in my heels and building for the next generation, and going to leave a heritage farm for somebody.
Thank you. Paul?
I don't think I do anything different farming-wise. The thing that I wish that I had done differently, and I still haven't figured out how to do that, is, oh boy, I'm not supposed to be doing this in public, but pay more attention to my family. It's when you're a farmer, the farm gets a hold of you, and it's a passion for you, and you feel the need almost all the time to do something. There's always something you need to do, and I neglected some of my family when I wish I hadn't, but I didn't know how to do it, and I still don't know how to do it. But I think I wish I could find a way for that to happen, to do what I did without neglecting my family so much.
Joey?
Yeah, I want to echo Paul a little bit in that for me, the balance that I'm still trying to find is the balance between homesteading, which I dearly love, you know, growing and preserving our own food and spending time in the kitchen and with the kids and with other people coming through all the time. Every one of us would tell you that our farm kitchens are a place of much visiting. People seem to be coming by all the time, and you know, just if I'd do anything different, I'd be more relaxed. You know, it's all gonna work out somehow anyway. So that's my goal.
Jack and Ian?
I wouldn't change too much, but I probably would. I would probably take a little better care of myself, take a little more time to relax. I've sort of ended up with some health issues, and you know, I think if I had been paying attention a little bit more, and you know, but you just get sort of once you've got this farming bug, it's you can't stop, and you just go because you got to get it done, and it's, you know, and your family suffers, you suffer. So I don't know. That's probably the one thing I would change.
Ann, how about you?
Yeah, well, when we were leaving today, our son-in-law said, yeah, the manure spreader's broken down. I'm going to have to do this and this and this. And I just thought, well, he's just taken on all the same worries as we've all been doing over the years, and now he won't see his family, and I'm kind of feeling sad for that. But I guess we're all up against the same thing. There's always equipment breaking. There's always things that have to be attended to, and you just have to find time for family somewhere in between. But it's really challenging. I hear you, Paul.
When I left with my sister to come down here, I looked out and there was about 15 cows where they weren't supposed to be. And I go, oh, geez. And 20 years ago, I wouldn't have shown up here. I'd gone right over and put them in, so I guess I'm getting a little bit better.
They're still out there, Paul, right?
Yeah. I'm waiting for the phone call.
Luckily, you don't have your cell phone, will you? Right?
Wrong. It's been buzzing in my pants. I'm just ignoring it.
Okay. Well, we want to thank John Nopper for the pictures and Susan Harlow for writing these great stories, and the real stories right here of the participants, these farmers who really set the stage.
Thanks.
Thank you. Orly?
I just want to say that there are some wonderful CSAs, and we'd love for you to go and visit with the CSAs and learn what they have to offer. They're all waiting for you in the lobby. And we have cookies and cider, and help yourself. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.